Well, I'm Lindsey and I am a mother, and I've been an English teacher for about 20 years. And when people hear that, they probably think that's like where my Speak Life story is, and it kind of is, but not in that I instruct people with writing. I was a high school teacher when I started my career, and the thing that was most shocking was how broken the young people that I went to go serve were. And the first few years I was asking myself, what am I doing here? Am I gonna even make it? These kids are so mean, they're so, there's so many barriers. They are broken, they are angry, they are gang affiliated, they are criminals in some cases, they're abusive to me. They would say, terrible things to me. And a few years in, I just kept being reminded about this was God's calling for me, that the reason I chose to teach high school was because that was the last chance before students graduated and were adults on their own. So it was kind of the last chance to love them and to pour into them before they went into the world. And that became really real for me probably 5 to 6 years into my teaching career. I had been teaching on the west side, and my husband and I moved to the Valley, and we started at a high school in the Valley together. At the beginning, my students took a long time to trust me, and it took just consistent, loving, kind words to them to get them to believe that I was an adult who could be trusted, who really did have their best interest at heart. And I taught kids who needed intervention, who were lower level. I taught the advanced placement kids. I taught, honors, all grades 9, 10, 11, 12. And some of the most significant moments were more them speaking to me, where I became like a hiding place. I think of that psalm that talks about God's being our hiding place. And when I became kind of a confessional for them, where they could really, open up about some of their deepest secrets. There are 3 that I can share that probably had the most impact on me and really reminded me that despite the hard work of teaching, it's totally worth it. One was one of my 16-year-old girls. She was a junior, and I'd had her as a 9th grader and a 10th grader. And then in 11th grade, she was in AP, and she had been like a star, just surrounded by a lot of friends, always happy, everything. And then she just slowly started to decline, to retreat, and I didn't know what was going on. And I pulled her aside, and she and a friend came and wanted to tell me kind of what was going on. And it turned out that that her stepfather had been abusing her, and she had to leave her home, and her mom stayed with her stepdad, and she had to go on her own at 16 to foster care and begin to navigate the emancipation process and navigate all that. And it wasn't so much her words that she said when she told me what was going on, but it was the fact that I had the ears and I had the hands open to hear her words and receive her words and give her a safe place to confide. And we're still in touch. We're still, friends. This was more than 10 years ago, and maybe closer to 20 years ago. She was just one of many students who were broken, who would eventually come and just sort of lay down their words and share their brokenness, and having the ability to speak and be affirmed and be encouraged by my words or just my listening was something that just affirmed for me again, like why God had called me to be a teacher. Because in English especially, we talk about issues and things come up for students, like where you're writing and you're arguing or discussing or reading literature. It might not happen so much in other classes where it's math or science, it's all fact-based, but when you're discussing issues where you're writing, you give students some freedom to journal. Some of these things come up. And another time, a student had been mine in 10th grade. She was 15, and we, had a good relationship, and she turned 16, turned 17, and when she was a senior, I wasn't her teacher, but I was in an office. I was working in an office job. And she came to me in the office and just was really upset about something, and it took a little while to figure out what was going on, and she had decided to share with me, and she was just devastated. She had been dating this guy and for like a year, and then eventually she decided to sleep with him, and he broke up with her like right after. And she was just a mess. And it was so sad and so hard to hold her in that moment. And no, I'm not her parent, and I wasn't even her teacher in that moment, but I had the opportunity to love her and encourage her and remind her of her precious worth and her precious value. And the last one was something that was like really impactful for me. And this was a student I'd had for 4 years. I'd had him as a 9th grader, 10th grader, 11th, 12th. And as a senior, he was my TA, and he was great all 4 years. And then all of a sudden he just started to change. And having been in relationship with him for so long, you notice when kids start acting differently. And so I had to kind of pull him aside and ask him what was going on. And he didn't want to tell me at first. I mean, he was so, you could just see the shame, you could just see the heaviness on his heart. And I was so sad. I was so broken for him, because I thought, there's nothing that you could tell me that would change how precious you are. There's nothing that you could say to me that would change your worth in God's eyes, or, who he's made you to be. And he began to tell me that he had gotten his girlfriend pregnant. And this is like, a 17-year-old boy that I had known since he was like 14. And he was completely alone. He hadn't told anyone. He told me. And I'm still, to this day, I still remember like he trusted me with such a heavy, heavy burden that he was carrying on his own. And I had the opportunity in that moment to just apologize that he felt he couldn't share that with anyone, that he was carrying it alone, and to encourage him and to help him figure out what could he do, who could he tell, could he talk to his parents, could he talk to counselors, like what is it that he could do. And in all of those moments and in many more, I was a refuge for my students to be able to just talk and then help them figure out how can they go to their parents, or how can they take the next step that they needed to remember that they have a future, they have worth, they have precious value. And I think just being able to see how God used me in those moments was really, really powerful to bring me to where I am now, which is I'm speaking life into my students still in a part-time way, but I'm teaching my daughters their precious value and their divine value in Christ, and their and then I'm writing a lot more, and I'm teaching other people to write, to remind themselves, like, despite the challenges, despite the devastation, despite the horrors that some of them have gone through, through their words, they might bring healing, and they can recognize their worth and their value. And so that's my Speak Life. That's what God has gifted me with, the ability to listen and encourage and share mercy and love to these young people who need to hear it.